A few months ago I started to get into Smash Bros. Ultimate, and as you might know, the best controller for that game is the GameCube controller still. Even after more than 20 years of its release, the GameCube controller is still the best controller for this game. So I thought to myself, alright, I have a dock that I don't use, I have a GameCube that I don't use, and I also have an extra USB adapter for the GameCube controller. So why don't I just put everything together and I make something nice and neat that can sit on my desk and it's pretty to look at and effective. And my goals were double. First, I wanted to have a Switch dock that was able to work exactly the same way as the normal dock, and I also wanted to keep a functioning GameCube. So I've seen a lot of different docks around on the internet, and they sacrifice a GameCube to use it as a dock. So for this video I want to show you my alternative for that. I didn't want to have to sacrifice my GameCube, and I also wanted to have a system that worked as GameCube, and I also wanted it to work as a Switch dock in order to use the GameCube ports directly on the Nintendo Switch. So how did I do it first? First, I put myself some self-imposed limitations. First, I wanted to use only components I already had at home. Second, I didn't want to break the GameCube. And third, I wanted it to be sitting on my desk and looking good. I didn't want to have any wires out or any cables hanging outside. So this is how the idea started. Honestly, I didn't plan a lot for that. I just went with it. Once I have an idea, I can be very impulsive. So in this Saturday night, I just decided to go all for it and then took all the components and started to get to work. So how did I do it? Well, first I got all the necessary equipment. I got my screwdrivers, my multimeter, of course, an old GameCube that I had, and different things to work with it. As you can see here, I used a big ball pen to create my own screwdriver. And the first thing was to take the GameCube apart and to take out the electric diagram for that. So what I did is, I took out the GameCube controller directly from the GameCube adapter and the USB adapter that I wanted to sacrifice for it. So my main point was I wanted to see exactly how the layout of this wire was. And for that I just checked my multimeter and started to take notes. This is pretty straightforward. Just put the multimeter in continuity and check exactly which part of the controller adapter goes to which cable connection. Once I had this done, all I wanted to try first was a proof of concept. I wanted to see if the ports on the GameCube original I/O were compatible with my USB third-party dock. So I first took a normal Ethernet cable. I love using Ethernet cable for this kind of project because you get a lot of wire in different colors and then it's easy to sort out and organize. And then I proceeded to just try to solder them together in order to test first if it was going to work. And once I had the proof of concept, continue and go all the way. So in that moment I realized that I hadn't used my soldering iron in a long time, so I had to assemble it. I took the diagram that I used first and started to first desolder all the previous components in the Switch controller adapter, the USB controller adapter, and then remove everything in order to then resolder using the right schematics that I took previously. Like I told you, I'm very impulsive, so at this point I realized that I didn't have any flux, and if you've ever soldered anything in your life, you know that without flux everything is extremely hard. So at this point I started using the solder socket and just my soldering iron, removing first all the connections in the old adapter that I was going to sacrifice in order to use these connections and connect them directly to the GameCube ports. Once I was done with that, I proceeded to organize my cabling in order to wire them directly from the USB adapter to the GameCube. And the way to do that was pretty straightforward. I took first the notes that I had before and I peeled some wire. Like I mentioned earlier, using the Ethernet wires is perfect because you have different colors, and this way it's perfect to organize and know exactly where you're soldering and to match every point of the board directly with what I measured earlier. I proceeded with the soldering first. At the beginning I started soldering only one controller port, the first player, because I wanted to check first that everything was going to work. At this point everything was still an idea in my head. I had never tested it before. I had checked online for a few diagrams, but I couldn't find exactly the diagrams for this USB third-party controller adapter. So first I wanted to check if it was gonna work at all. So I proceeded to solder directly to the first port of the GameCube controller adapter, and then once I had done that, I went away and I soldered it to the original GameCube port. So in this way, everything that I was doing is passing through the connection from the GameCube front ports to my third-party adapter. As you can see here, I'm soldering directly to the trace on the GameCube original port, and I'm taking the reference that I measured earlier to make sure that I'm soldering to the right port. I didn't want to have the wrong pins. I don't know what the other pins do, so I just wanted to make sure and be 100% certain that it was going to work. Then my next thing was to connect it to the switch directly in order to test that it was working. But of course, like I told you, I didn't plan anything for this, and I had never even done any tests about this functionality. So I thought that there was something wrong with my wiring. When I connected a USB Type-C adapter to my USB Type-A adapter, it didn't work. So I thought there was something wrong in my diagram, and because of that, I desoldered and resoldered in several parts. First, trying to see if that was the issue. I checked for any shorts or any continuity issues. Everything was fine up to this point, so I couldn't really get at why it wasn't working. Anyways, I just proceeded to repeat everything. I did everything twice, just wanted to make extra sure that my diagram was correct. So by this point, I was a little bit afraid that it was gonna work. But in the end, I continued checking. Once I was done with all the wiring and all the resoldering, I went away and I did another test using the same USB Type-C adapter to Type-A, hoping that it was gonna work this time. Unfortunately, again, it didn't work, and at this point I realized, wait a minute, let me try first with a known USB adapter to controller. So I went and got the other adapter that I regularly use, and that's where I got this idea. Maybe the problem is not my adapter that I just made, it's actually everything, and that was it. Once I checked with the given adapter that I knew it was working, and it was the original Nintendo adapter, I realized that the problem was here. So I went to my normal dock, so I took all these cables and all these adapters that I had just recently soldered, I brought them to my normal Switch dock, I connected them there, and here off camera, I'm actually checking that everything works. And yes, everything was working properly. So the problem all this time was in my work. Well, it wasn't in my work, but not my diagrams or my soldering. The problem was that this USB Type-C adapter that I was using was not providing enough power, and it couldn't provide enough juice for the USB adapter to work. So after soldering all the 4 ports, once I knew my proof of concept worked, I proceeded to go and connect all the 4 ports to the USB sacrifice adapter. Here I had a lot of very long cables. First, I wanted to make sure that everything was actually doable. I didn't know that what I had to do. Like I mentioned, I was just going with the flow with it, and pretty much I was winging it as I went. Here, the first things that I noticed was that with so much cabling that I had, I couldn't work with it, but that was fixable later. And here, I just proceeded to check where I was going to put the dock. I checked everywhere because, like I mentioned, I didn't want to break the GameCube. So in the end, what I did is just stick to the GameCube that I had and find some places where I could fit it without having to break anything or remove any working parts. In the end, I found that right on the right side of the GameCube, it was exactly the same thickness or the perfect thickness for the PCB of the dock to fit. So I proceeded to put it there, and using a Dremel tool, I had to shave off a little bit of components in the inside of the GameCube, but in the end, everything worked. I was able to fit the PCB of the sacrifice dock inside the GameCube. I trimmed the cables from the soldering from the USB adapter to the controller ports in the GameCube, and in the end I had a very interesting and working GameCube. So let me show you how it looks like. For me, I'm very satisfied with this project, and lo and behold, here is my finished project with a GameCube working as a dock to my Switch. So the way that I thought about it was that I wanted it to sit on my desk, and I didn't want to ruin everything. So what I have here is a removable just stand where I can put the USB Type-C directly on the Switch. This is an extension USB Type-C cable that I had to buy. This was the only component that I had to buy, but it was around €5, so I don't really mind about that. And in the end, it looks great on my desk. I'm very, very satisfied with this project. As you can see here, all the cabling, all the I/O is on the back of the GameCube because it comes from that side. As you can see here on this side, you can still catch a glimpse of the PCB of the GameCube still. So this is the dock of the sacrifice switch that I use for this. You can see here that internally I connected the USB cables to the dock, and then they are going straight to the ports. And on the back of the GameCube, then I had to shave off a little bit of plastic with the Dremel tool in order to allow the cables and the connections to be free. So if there is one thing that I would change in this, would be definitely this part. I'm not satisfied with the ribbon cable, this LVDS cable just coming out. I intend on making that more secure, maybe making an opening just for the USB Type-C part of it. But in the end, I love the looks. It works perfectly, so I've been playing a lot of Smash Bros. On this test setup. And for me, for my personal use, I think it's just perfect. In the end, my idea was to keep both devices working, and they all work perfectly. The GameCube works as standalone as itself as it should, and the Switch also works as a dock. So all in all, I'm very satisfied. If anybody's interested in doing something like this, well, it's doable, and I just hope that you liked this video and it helps you for any ideas that you might have. Thank you.